Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome to our online panel, Perspective on Latin American Stories, a discussion with librarians and publishers. My name is Alicia Mandujano from The Grader, and I will be your host. That being said, we are honored to have a Latin American Stories librarian who will not be acting as a panelist, but also as a host. Someone I will be introducing to you shortly. However, before I get to that, I wanted to thank you everyone who has joined and look forward to an excellent level of participation. This is the first in what we hope will be many online panels that focus on Latin American studies. Now, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. Today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. We welcome you to review the content and share it with colleagues. We also invite your comment and question. Please look at the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of a question at any point, just type in there to both the panelists and attendants. We will pose questions to the panelists during the Q&A portion of the event. If you have a look on the chat, we have a introduction for translation. If you think that you won't be able to understand all the English part, you can translate to Spanish or even to Portuguese. Please go ahead if you feel comfortable with that. The webinar will end at 2 p.m. today. If there are any unanswered questions at that point, we will be in touch directly. So finally, today's moderator is Dr. Liladhar Pence. Liladhar is a librarian for the Caribbean and Latin American collection at the University of California, Berkeley. He coordinates the acquisition and cataloging workflows and streamlines the receipt of Latin American books in Spanish, Portuguese, and other languages. He works with the student groups at the Center for Latin American Studies to maximize the use of Latin American materials to support scholarly communication. At this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Liladhar. Liladhar, it's all yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes to everyone who is attending. Boa tarde, if you are speaking Portuguese. Without further ado, I wanted to thank Alicia and the Greuter team for organizing this webinar and inviting me to be a moderator as well as a participant. So I'm wearing two hats and I'm not intimidated, but I'm going to do my best. So let's start with our brief introductions, and let's start with A, which is Angelica Lopez Torres. If you would like to briefly introduce yourself, then Beatriz will go and then Eduardo will go. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Hola, buenas tardes. I'm Angelica Lopez Torres. I'm the International Rights Manager at the University of Texas Press. So I handle rights and translations, especially and particularly in Spanish for the University Press.
Hello, and thank you also for the invitation. My name is Beatriz Verführt. I've been working for Iberoamericana Verführt in Frankfurt for 13 years. And for the last 4 years, I'm the owner and managing director with my sister, who's based in Madrid.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Una disculpa, yo voy a hablar durante el seminario en español, pero con la confianza de que hay muchos colegas que sé que entienden el idioma y no tendrán ningún problema. Mi nombre es Eduardo Rubalcaba Burgón. Trabajo desde hace 18 años en la Biblioteca Daniel Cosío Villegas del Colegio de México, en donde he estado a cargo he ocupado el puesto de bibliógrafo catalogador. Estuve también a cargo de la coordinación de gestión de colecciones de la biblioteca y actualmente estoy a cargo de la coordinación de servicios. Gracias por la invitación.
Well, now that the introductions are out of our way, let's start with some brief warming up activities, because it's like unusually cold in the Bay Area today. So one of the warming up activities is asking you some brief questions. And one of that is to Angelica, which deals with your website. You are such a huge powerhouse of publication. And your website says, by launching a scholarly press, the University of Texas at Austin made several important statements. Book matter, books educate, and publishing good books is a public responsibility, right? because every good endeavor comes with a responsibility and a valuable component of higher education. Can you briefly talk about what it means to University of Texas Press to publish good books? You know, the good books is like this. So, entre comillas. So could you please talk about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. I feel for all of us, a lot of books are really good books. But thank you for that question. I think from the outset, UT Press has been committed to publishing exceptional authors, exceptional books from all over the world, especially with a focus on Latin America. In fact, as I was doing some research for this, I realized that one of the first books published by the press in 1951 was an English language translation of The Florida of the Inca from the Spanish, the original Spanish. So yeah, UT Press has a long history of publishing scholarly titles and trade titles. And as an academic publisher, we support a lot of the mission of our own institution at UT Austin to make the knowledge accessible. And we provided a way to engage with some of this existing scholarship that all of our scholars and our authors are putting out there. So good books, in our view, are books that educate, those that uplift thoughtful research, regardless of how big the market may be and how the audience may be. We feel that it's important knowledge that has to be published and be shared with the world and disseminated. So all of our books, even including those trade titles that might be for the quote general audience, all of our books have to go through peer review, and we think that process is what makes a good book an even better book. So we publish award-winning books in several academic fields of distinguished scholars, writers, artists from all over the world. And that includes Latin American studies and all of the subsets. And that can include anywhere from anthropology, architecture, art and visual studies, history, literature, film, media, photography, pre-Columbian. I can go on and on. But and then we also publish journals, and those are notable titles that are devoted to the humanities, and those are also partnered with leading associations, premier scholars, and those also disseminate high quality research. And we're trying to bridge those, help bridge those barriers between academic and communities.
Wow, what a great answer. That means you are also aware of knowledge creation, and as well as you act as a bridge to mediate information needs of those who want to know more about Latin American studies, right?
Yes.
And that brings me to another question, because Spain has had a natural tryst of destiny with Latin America, and transatlantic views matter, right, for all of us. So for Beatriz, I have a very interesting question. You have been steadfast ally of Latin American studies librarians as far as the purveyor of information goes for last, I think, since 1975, as I understand. And I wanted to ask you a big question, because I was looking at your website to do the research for this panel, and it says, our publications are mainly academic in the field of humanities and directed to Hispanists and Latin Americanists. Could you please provide a little bit of historical background, how the whole thing started, how that idea came to your mind, or your father's mind, or whoever started the business? I'm not familiar with it. So please educate a little bit about that. And why did you think it was important to focus on such a niche field, right? For some of us, like Hispanists and Latin Americanists, why didn't you choose any other field? So if you have any ideas on that, that will be great. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. I guess that almost every business starts with a strong personal interest or passion. And so the beginnings of Iberoamericana Verführt also started with personal motivations. After several years in Argentina, my father came back to Frankfurt to study Hispanic studies. And he realized that it was really hard to find Spanish and Latin American books in Germany. So thanks to his contact with Latin America and Spain, he started to import books he needed for his studies and to offer them to academic libraries. And years later, in 1977, he started the publishing house with the release of our journal Iberoamericana and some titles. And again, it was personal interest that what motivated him to take this step, because he saw the need to support the Hispanic and Latin American studies in Germany with a matching editorial program which didn't exist at this time, in contrast to the US or Spain or even France. In the 1990s, he opened an office in Madrid in order to better distribute the books as they would receive high attention. One of his major goals was to support the transatlantic dialogue between Spanish and Latin American studies. Along came the bookshop Iberoamericana, located in the heart of Barrio de las Letras in Madrid, where the import of Latin American titles continued and from where we expanded our services to academic libraries and other institutions around the world. As publishers, we release now about 80 titles a year focused on history, literature, art, language, on Latin America and Spain, mostly in Spanish, but also in English and some Portuguese and German, sorry. Our bookshop is specialized in attending academic and institutional libraries around the world through firm orders, standing orders, and approval plans. We focus on publications from Spain, Portugal, and Latin America. And today we are proud to still be an independent publishing house and bookshop and to continue our father's project with the same passion as he did.
So every good endeavor has a passion, an idea, and interest in a field. And it starts small, and then like a little plant, it continues to grow, provide fruits to all of us as a consumer of the information when it comes to Latin American studies. So the next question is to Mr. Eduardo, Senior Eduardo. I must admit, I ended up in Latin American studies by a sort of an accident. I was born in India, and when I was in India, I had no idea that there was a field of South Asian studies. I had Indian history, Indian sociology, etc., etc. But when I came to North America, I was told, no. There is no Indian studies, there is South Asian studies field. So when I came to Latin America, I was told there is a I started studying Latin America, I realized there is a field called Latin American studies. And when I was in Mexico, I asked my colleagues, what does that mean to be a part of Latin American studies? So Eduardo, the question is to you as a librarian. No? What do you think from your perspective, sitting in the Ciudad de Mexico, what it means to be a Latin American studies librarian, or what that field means to you? And what do you think have changed for, let's say, last 10, 15 years as we are having different global crises, as well as what do you think in the future, how it will look according to your opinion, from Colegio de Mexico, which matters to all of us here. So if you can please answer, I will be grateful. Thank you.
Gracias. Bueno, son varias preguntas. Yo creo que mi perspectiva como bibliotecario es justamente el ver cómo desde el Colegio de México han ido cambiando también los estudios latinoamericanos. Si bien el Colegio de México no tiene un centro de estudios latinoamericanos, la mayoría de las investigaciones que se llevan a cabo aquí en la institución están permeadas por la influencia de América Latina. Hay muchos estudiantes latinoamericanos en el Colegio de México que traen sus temas de interés a la institución, que vienen de Colombia, de Argentina, de Chile, de Perú, justamente con intereses particulares, y eso nos obliga como biblioteca a tener actualizada esa información. Pero creo que el Colegio de México no es un caso único. Obviamente hay en México otras instituciones que hacen este tipo de estudios. Desafortunadamente, solamente en la UNAM hay un centro de estudios dedicado a América Latina y que imparte programas en licenciatura y en posgrado. Además lo hace de manera conjunta con la Facultad de Filosofía y Letras y con la Facultad de Ciencias Políticas y Sociales. Pero eso no quiere decir que en las otras instituciones no se hagan estudios latinoamericanos. Hay muchas instituciones trabajando con temas de América Latina, en Guadalajara, en Monterrey, en Yucatán, es decir, en la mayoría de las instituciones de educación superior que tienen programas de investigación, sobre todo en ciencias sociales y humanidades, se hace este tipo de estudios, aunque no haya esta tradición como en muchas universidades en Estados Unidos donde hay centros de estudios en Latinoamérica. Ahora bien, los temas que, como yo he visto en los últimos 18, casi 20 años que llevo aquí en el Colegio de México, han variado significativamente. Ahora vemos temas que han surgido justamente en las últimas 2 décadas como el tema de la violencia social, el narcotráfico. Vemos, por ejemplo, la parte bueno, un problema que está también muy presente, no solo en los países de América Latina, sino a nivel internacional, el tema del agua es algo que también está preocupando mucho. El tema del género, con tantos problemas que tenemos aquí en México con la muerte de mujeres. Y bueno, probablemente muchos de ustedes saben que apenas el lunes el Colegio de México anunció la creación del Centro de Estudios de Género. Ya se oficializó este centro que había funcionado como un programa desde hace casi 20 años, pero ahora es un centro de estudios. Entonces, eso nos da una idea también de la dimensión de cómo van cambiando estas temáticas no solo en México, sino a nivel internacional, pero me refiero específicamente a lo que yo he visto en los últimos años aquí en México, desde el punto de vista bibliotecario y cómo nos toca trabajar con los materiales bibliográficos desde la Biblioteca Daniel Cosío Villegas.
Pues muchas gracias. Tengo que hacer una confesión. Para mí, México, América Latina, estudios iberoamericanos, ha sido una bendición. O sea, for me, it has been a blessing because Mexico and rest of the Latin America are many multiple universes. And there is no single answer to define what Latin American studies means. Of course, I can wear my straight jacket and say from North American perspective, it means this. From European perspective, it means that. But Latin American studies is such a huge field, right? But then that brings me to another question. You see, our country is made up of migrants. Whether I like it, I don't agree with it. I'm not talking from my perspective. One agrees with it or one doesn't agree with it. This is a country made by a lot of different cultures coming in here for different sorts of reasons, coexisting, sometimes having uncomfortable relationships. So you know, Angelica, it brings me to you. Because for me, you are an example of a person who can migrate between multiple worlds at the same time, right? You are,
Absolutely.
like you say. So Latinx experience, for example, in America is very different. And please forgive me, it's not my place to characterize it as a different or any other way. So could you please a little bit tell me about, like, you know, you are publishing like almost 100 new books each year. And there are several journals, and it's like such an intensive scholarly work to maintain those standards. How do you then deal with being a Latin Americanist and at the same time dealing with the Latinx component? You know, that will be very interesting for me. And there is a second question. You know, many of the Latinos who live in America and Latinx, you know, the generation which follows, which identifies themselves to be American, but at the same time affiliated with Latin America. Do you have any plans to produce books in Spanish? You know, these are the two questions. Sorry, I'm condensing them.
I'll try to address them both, but let me know if I don't get to any point. But for us, the Latin American Studies list and the Latinx Studies list are two different components, and so we, you know, the Latinx is looking at the experience of Latin American descendants that are here living in the United States. So those, that can include Brazilians, it can exclude people from Spain, but that's how we distinguish it. So the lived experiences here. And so for our Latin American list, as I mentioned earlier, we've really demonstrated that commitment to Latin American studies, and it's continued to present day. And so like Eduardo was mentioning, our publishing program has adapted with the field and the fields where we publish. Where usually the progression of the field is what's informing our publications. We're usually publishing new scholars as well, so they're naturally bringing in their new perspectives or adding to past research. So that's kind of how we adapt and we grow with the field. So those are the emerging fields. So for example, when we started, UT Press has always been known for their pre-Columbian list in Latin American studies. And while that continues, we continue publishing that, and that remains. We've expanded into other areas, anthropology, Central American studies, similar to how Eduardo was talking about, just, you know, those are the new things that emerge. And also we're in Texas, so it makes a lot of sense for us to have a strong commitment to that. And I mean, literally our neighbors, right? So we're a strong commitment to border as well, the borders, but we've also kind of expanded our ideas about what the borderlands mean. It doesn't have to be just geographical. There's a lot of our authors who are expanding boundaries in their own fields. And that can also be not only in Latinx, it could also be in Latin American studies when we're talking about different borders there. So, and then to say that we've also built on, we've often looked at what our own parent institution here at the University of Texas at Austin. We have such strengths with the Benson Latin American collection. So we try to build on those and adapt with those. So those are the strengths we try to cultivate, I suppose. And actually I wanted to mention, we published one of a collection, it was a year ago, with the Lilas Benson here, and it's called the Library of the Americas, and that's a collection showing the depth of their own collection there. And trying to remember the last question, the Spanish question. At the moment, we're not looking to publish anything in Spanish, though usually what we do, when this is my job, I'm looking for publishers that want to translate our books and publish them in Spanish in Latin America. So that's usually how we're getting our work out there.
Wow, such a answer that makes me think about the next question to our colleague, Beatriz. You know, like I said, transatlantic perspective, and I'm not exaggerating. What I'm trying to ask Beatriz, because, you know, from Spanish perspective, and what do you think are some of the topics which will become relevant? For example, Angelica mentioned estudios de fronterizos, no? Estudios fronterizos, or violencia contra género, studies of gender, I believe, or human trafficking. And I don't want to focus especially on narco trafficking, because the whole world starts to go like crazy. Latin America is much bigger than just one aspect of it. It's an important aspect. I'm not saying it's not. So what do you think, Beatriz, from your perspective, you know, because you run a business, what is your perspective on what kind of publishing trends you see emerging in different subjects in Latin American, and I should use for Hispanics, which are important, you know?
I think there are always research trends besides the study of the classics like Calderón de la Barca, Lope de Vega, Cervantes, or Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, El Inca Garcilaso, that will always be of interest. But one of the trends that has prevailed over the last 10 years and even before is film studies, both from a regional point of view and from a comparative perspective, like a book we just published, Rompecabezas de la Memoria, focus on film in Colombia, or Una historia comparada de cine latinoamericano. And these titles I have mentioned deal with violence, feminism, and memoir, which are topics that have been frequently investigated over the last year, and that already Eduardo also mentioned. Another well-discussed subject is migration, like a title we just published from Mabel Moraña, Niñas de Fuga, where the migration is examined from different disciplines such as history, sociology, anthropology, art, or philosophy. And also gender studies and all its derivations are also must these days. Our last title is A Flor del Cuerpo, where the different representations of gender in cultural work and social movements are discussed. In linguistics, we currently see a turn to the so-called digital humanities, like la comunicación por correo electrónico or la opinión pública en la red, where the authors analyze the different manifestations of public opinion in digital environments. To sum up, over the last years, interdisciplinary studies have taken over, as well as film studies, gender studies, and digital humanities. Yes, and for the near future, we expect also studies on relation with Asia, isolation, and for sure the impact of the pandemic.
Wow. Okay. You know, I'm kind of struck by one comment in the chat, right? And tiene razón, porque yo soy hindú y hablo español. Entonces yo no puedo hablar en hindi. ¿Por qué no hablan? La pregunta es, ¿por qué no en castellano? Now, I don't know the difference between español and castellano, and I don't want to go there. No quería ir allá para saber. Son mayorías quienes hablan inglés los que escuchan. pensar temas de asuntos de latinoamericanos en inglés me resulta, no sé, un hecho más de colonización. Pues, don Carlos Gallera, estoy de acuerdo y tampoco un poco no de acuerdo. Porque yo soy hindú, ¿no? Como dije, y yo puedo hablar en hindi, pero nadie me va a entender. Y queremos que nuestro webinar sería inclusivo para todos. Y puedo comunicar también, qué bueno, puedo comunicar en español si quieran usted, pero yo pienso sería una manera más amable. O sea, 5 idiomas internacionales por UNESCO son ¿qué? Árabe, inglés, ruso, español, portugués y chino. Yo solo no hablo chino, pero otras 4 idiomas yo puedo hablar en eso más o menos. Otra pregunta es para el señor Eduardo. Pues voy a preguntarle, tratar de defender mi pregunta en español. Y si estoy haciendo algunos errores, pueden pegarme después. Una pregunta. ¿Puede un poco hablar sobre los fondos, sobre de estudios latinoamericanos que tienen usted en su biblioteca y qué planes tienen? Un poco sobre libros electrónicos, algo sobre los fondos originarios de estudios latinoamericanos, por favor.
Bueno, el Colegio de México tiene una tradición ya de muchos años en la adquisición de fondos latinoamericanos. Me remonto rápidamente porque sé que tengo poco tiempo, pero me remonto a los años 70 en que el director de la biblioteca en aquel entonces, el maestro Ario Garza Mercado, que seguramente muchas personas han oído hablar de él, él organizó unos viajes de selección en diferentes países de América Latina, a los que acudieron colegas de la biblioteca que estaban en aquel entonces trabajando, y cada uno de ellos recorrió entre 2, 3, 4 países justamente para adquirir lo que se estaba publicando en ese entonces. Bueno, eso digamos que es como un antecedente muy importante para la biblioteca. No quiere decir que ahí empezó el desarrollo de la colección latinoamericana, pero ahí se expresó claramente el interés que había por parte del Colegio de México para fortalecer la colección latinoamericana, y muchos de los vínculos que se construyeron en aquel periodo no han cesado. Seguimos adquiriendo pues material de los diferentes países de América Latina, cada vez con más dificultades, porque en la actualidad, por ejemplo, el tema de los gastos de envío está significando mucho para nosotros, nos está limitando mucho en términos de poder traer material. Comprarlo a veces es más caro, pagar los gastos de envío, que el precio del libro, ¿no? Entonces, eso nos dificulta mucho, pero siempre buscamos construir alianzas con las instituciones que estén de acuerdo con nosotros para poder intercambiar publicaciones del Colegio de México por publicaciones de las instituciones. Ahora, por ejemplo, de manera reciente, siempre hemos estado presentes en la Feria del Libro de Guadalajara, pero de manera más reciente nos hemos acercado a la Feria del Libro Universitario que organiza la UNAM. Ahí tuve el gusto de conocer a Angélica hace un par de años. Y bueno, es una oportunidad porque también ahí vienen muchas editoriales de América Latina donde nosotros podemos adquirir libros, ¿no? Creo que la principal limitante tiene que ver justamente con el tema presupuestal. Si nosotros pudiéramos, compraríamos más de lo que se publica en América Latina, o también estaríamos trabajando con muchas instituciones en el tema del canje, por ejemplo. Pero por mencionarles un aspecto, el interés que tiene nuestra biblioteca en construir esta colección, año con año, en los últimos 10 años, la Biblioteca del Colegio de México adquirió aproximadamente unos 100,000 volúmenes de libros impresos. Y de esos 100,000 volúmenes, aproximadamente el 60%, es decir, poco más de 60,000, los recibimos en donativo. Entonces eso, para darnos una idea de la magnitud de la biblioteca y de la importancia que tiene para nosotros el hecho de atraer esos donativos, porque no solo adquirimos libros de reciente publicación, sino tenemos muchos libros que nos donan y que fueron publicados hace 3, 4, 5 décadas, pero para nosotros nos interesa preservar ese tipo de materiales. En cuanto al libro electrónico, debo decir que nosotros respondemos a la demanda. Al inicio de la década pasada había mucho entusiasmo por parte de la comunidad del colegio, profesores y estudiantes, en cuanto al libro electrónico, pero conforme fue pasando el tiempo se fueron dando cuenta de las dificultades que representaban los modelos imponen algunos proveedores en cuanto al DRM, en cuanto a que justo estas cuestiones de que solo puedes descargar 30 páginas, solo puedes imprimir 50 páginas, y creo que ahí hubo un desencanto. Ahora atendemos a la necesidad, a la demanda. Si ellos quieren el libro en formato electrónico, lo compramos, pero en muchas ocasiones nos dicen, prefiero esperar a que llegue el libro impreso, porque eso me facilita más mi trabajo. Entonces, seguimos adquiriendo muchos libros impresos, no nos cerramos a la idea de comprar libros electrónicos, también tenemos una buena colección, pero creo que todavía en la actualidad la mayoría de los libros que compramos son en formato impreso.
Pues muchas gracias, señor Eduardo. Y tenía una pregunta un poco extraña para usted también. Por ejemplo, aquí en Biblioteca de Universidad de California también tenemos fondos especiales. Por ejemplo, Bancroft Library, todo el mundo sabe. Y tengo mi colega ahí, doctor José Adrián Barragán Álvarez, que nosotros colaboramos y tenemos fondos especiales. ¿Hay algunos fondos especiales en Colegio de México y qué tipo de como colaboración existe, o un poquito solamente enfocar en eso, porque yo sé que tenemos muchas preguntas y tiempo está muy corto?
Sí, tenemos un acervo especial, una colección especial en la Biblioteca del Colegio de México, con poco más de 25,000 volúmenes. Igual podría decirles que la mayoría de esos volúmenes, yo creo que más del 90%, los hemos recibido en donativo. La política, por ejemplo, en esta colección, que la acabamos de actualizar recientemente, es que ingresan a esa colección especial todos los libros que han sido publicados antes de 1931. Tenemos ahí ejemplares muy valiosos, ejemplares en algunos casos únicos, y bueno, es parte de la colección del Colegio de México, que está a disposición de los usuarios, no solo de la comunidad del colegio, sino de otras instituciones.
Wow, great, wonderful. Tenemos algunas preguntas en chat, pero vamos a retornar allá más si permito los tiempos, pero vamos a seguir con una charla interesante. The next question is for Angelica, and the question is like a oddball question. You know, the life is full of surprises. ¿Quién sabía hace 30 años que voy a comenzar mi vida aquí como un lavaplato, trabajando con los mexicanos que me ayudaron a sobrevivir primeras experiencias de la migración, ¿no? En este país? Y estoy súper agradecido. So the question is, like a publisher, you also deal with your levels of surprises. Some are pleasant, some are unpleasant. Such is life. It's a mixed bag. So what do you think, what books have surprised you? Right? For example, at Berkeley, there was I think, urban myth. Oh, we have a book with the human skin, and I'm sorry, envelope on it. But that's not true. It was proven at the end of the day. So what are some of these myths you have dealt with, you know, surprises?
Yeah, I feel like surprises have been this past year. COVID has thrown all of their surprises, but I'll focus on good surprises. One book that comes to mind is we published this book by Barbara Mundy, The Death of Aztec Tenochtitlan, The Life of Mexico City. And we always knew this was going to be an important book, but it's a very large book. It has a lot of illustrations. It's heavily illustrated. So sometimes with those types of books, you don't know how sales are going to be, how ebook sales are going to be, because you know, it's just a larger book, but it has transcended all expectations. It's really showed the ways that interdisciplinary work has can show new insights. In this book, it kind of uncovered a lot of new significant things about previous research. It's won all of the awards. It's kind of swept the field. It took one of the big prizes in the Latin American Studies Association, the Price Book Award. It's been translated into Spanish. Sometimes these books that are highly illustrated aren't going to be translated because it's costly to translate and publish those as well. So that one has been wonderful. For example, trying to think of other. I'll leave it at that. I'll give other people.
No, it's quite understandable that there have been opportunities and challenges in this past
Absolutely.
year and a half, and we can do only our best. Como decían mis compañeros de trabajo, siempre positivo. No hay vuelta atrás. So always ahead and adelante, so forward and upward. So that question comes to same to the Beatriz, because as a business to survive in the epoch of pandemic, it's a challenge for all of us. What has surprised you? What type of challenges you have faced? And what type of opportunities you have seen emerging in these turbulent times? Tiempos recios, como dice, ¿no? In one of the books I read. So,
I think that one of the challenges, but also great occasions in the last year for sure, is the digital transformation in the book market we are living. And as a very specialized and independent publisher, a partnership like the one we have with the Broider helped us to develop faster the digitization of our archive. As a small independent publisher, we are always looking for opportunities to grow and innovate as the big publishers do. And we had we have lately had some sales of our complete digital archive, which came from libraries we worked closely already for many years. So that was also a big surprise for me that they didn't have already all our titles, and but it underlines the importance of digitizing the complete backlist. So a book that surprised us is maybe a little bit like the one that described Angelica, maybe not with that many illustrations, but also a very huge book we published in 2007 about the Moriscos, who are the Moors that converted to Christianism after the Spanish reconquest, in a small village of less than 10,000 residents in the middle of Spain. It's written by the well-known historian Trevor Dutton and entitled Los Moriscos de Villarrubia de los Ojos. And this title is one of our bestsellers, even though it would just suggest a very regional public. But on the side note, we didn't sell that many ebooks from this book, but more printed ones.
Wow. So print coexists in harmony with ebooks. That's my conclusion.
Okay.
And like you said, Angelica, that the book on Tenochtitlan is very relevant today. Like I mentioned earlier, that there is like, before this webinar, I was thinking about 500 years anniversary of La Conquista, and then 200 years of what they call it, independence, right? Especially in Latin America and in Mexico, of course, 1821. So that next question brings me to Mr. Eduardo. And ¿cómo decir? La vida consiste de los retos. Y retos son muy complicados, ¿no? Exámenes que estamos, tenemos algunas veces miedos, algunas veces tenemos desafíos, pero tenemos unas sorpresas gratas. ¿Y qué son las sorpresas gratas para usted que han enfrentado o conocido durante últimos 18 meses durante la pandemia en Colegio de México? ¿Puede un poco elaborar, don Eduardo, por favor?
Claro, gracias por la pregunta. Bueno, pues yo creo que entre las sorpresas gratas, bueno, ha habido varias, yo creo, dentro de todo el asunto de la pandemia, pero yo creo que ha habido varias. Recuerdo, por ejemplo, al inicio de la pandemia, una sorpresa muy grata para muchos de nosotros fue cuando varios de los editores y de los proveedores distribuidores de bases de datos de revistas decidieron abrir sus acervos para las bibliotecas, para los usuarios, ¿no? Estábamos en un momento muy complicado porque no sabíamos cómo iba a avanzar. Estábamos en el mes de mayo y teníamos confianza de que en el mes de agosto probablemente podríamos regresar al trabajo presencial, a las clases en el Colegio de México, pero había mucha gente buscando información y no todas las universidades estaban abiertas. Nosotros tuvimos que abrir el préstamo de libros a domicilio en el mes de mayo porque así lo demandaba la comunidad. Entonces empezamos a abrir periodos de préstamo porque requerían libros impresos, no solamente los recursos electrónicos. Entonces esa fue una sorpresa grata, ¿no? Que hace poco lo comentaba en un webinar también de la Asociación Mexicana de Bibliotecarios, y les decía, bueno, más allá de pensar en aprovecharse de la situación, los proveedores fueron solidarios con las bibliotecas y abrieron esos periodos de acceso abierto para sus publicaciones. Yo creo que, bueno, eso en la parte de proveedores de recursos de información, y la sorpresa grata también es en el caso del Colegio de México, de la biblioteca, pues compromiso que ha asumido el personal de la biblioteca. En esta biblioteca trabajamos casi 80 personas y la mayoría de ellos ha colaborado durante este periodo para poder seguir trabajando, para poder llevar nuestras actividades desde casa, y esto pues combinándolo con todas las cuestiones que tenemos también en casa, que cuidamos hijos, estamos con nuestra familia, etcétera. Entonces la mayoría de la gente ha estado con esa disposición. Eso nos ha permitido continuar con nuestras actividades, con ciertas dificultades, pero en la medida de lo posible llevar a cabo el trabajo dentro de la biblioteca, aunque sí debo de decir que pues, hay actividades que por obvias razones no hemos podido realizar, como la compra regular de libros o la adquisición de libros de manera regular como lo veníamos haciendo hasta principios de 2020. Creo que esas son algunas de las que yo destacaría.
Perfecto. And now I have to ask myself a question. And that's the most difficult thing, right? Un viaje dentro de sí mismo, preguntando la misma pregunta. And the question was, how did we deal with our pandemic here? What kind of opportunities have come forward? So, pandemic is intense. It was intense. It continues to be feroz in some parts of the world. People are dying as I speak. However, I try to be positive. That's the only thing I can do. And one thing I must say thank you to my colleagues at UC Berkeley, that they have been the most supportive colleagues, including the vendors. They have opened their databases. They have been understanding about our information needs in light of physical closures that we have experienced. So there is a HathiTrust, temporary access, which has enabled a lot of things for us to do from home. Of course, there have been activities done by my colleagues at Bancroft Library, for which I'm very grateful, because they have opened their reading rooms to a certain extent, and they see the users, because the information needs of special collections users are very different, slightly different than mine. Then we have vendors coming through with their ebooks packages. And I don't want to put people on spot, but there are some people in this, I believe, in these audiences who know what it means to get an access to an ebook when you cannot access your paper copy. And that brings me to the, some of the questions are very interesting in our chat transcript. So before we address those questions, we have a few minutes left to talk a little bit about your collaboration with other institutions. So for example, Angelica, you already work in collaboration with Center for Mexican American Studies, and Lilia Benson, Latin American Studies and Collections. Are you considering any kind of international collaborations? For example, in Latin America, UNAM, Universidad Andina, Externado are just some examples which come to my mind. I'm not trying to pick on those universities or Colegio de Mexico. Are you trying to? So if you have any insights on that, I'll be very grateful.
Yes, I think we're always looking for these types of collaborations on many levels. We are already collaborating with some, and that's in our translations. Our books get translated. So, recently at the top of my mind, we've had worked with Uniandes. We've had work with the Pontificia at Católica del Peru, and we've had Pontificia at the Chile, Flaxo, Ecuador. I mean, we do these collaborations. We're always looking for those. I think in UNAM, the University of Texas at Austin actually is hosted. UNAM houses an office for UT Austin there. Me personally, when I'm going to Seifi Luni, as Eduardo mentioned earlier, that's one of the collaborations that we're doing. When I'm going to FIL in Guadalajara, I'm usually looking for these partnerships, these ways to find collaborators for our books. So I think the answer is yes. We're always looking for those new ways.
Wow, that's an inspirational answer. I feel inspired. And why collaboration matters? You may think, oh, it's not that important, but it matters on the long run. Yes. So that brings me to a question to Beatriz. For example, why would I choose you as a destination to publish my first book? Especially, I'll tell you a case of one of the faculty members here on campus, Dalet Dominguez. She published her book. And I must mention Caribbean studies, because I don't want to be ostracized by missing the whole region of I will not call it Latin America, but Caribe, El Caribe. And it has its own, multiculturalism. Why would I choose you, Beatriz? Why shouldn't I choose any other? What makes you as an attractive destination for an author? What do you think? What services you offer, or how you choose your authors also, So if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yes. All our publications are peer-reviewed by independent researchers specializing in the related field, so that the author gets qualified feedback from an expert of this field. We also pay special attention to spelling and grammar, and therefore all of our manuscripts are professionally proofread, but also cover designs are often noticed positively. We work very closely with our authors, so they have one single editor they work with from the very beginning of the publication process, and therefore a contact in the office they have a contact in the office they can reach out in case of need. Our authors and editors and directly are mostly researchers from different countries, not only from Spain, Latin America, and Germany, but also from the United States, Canada, or European countries, or Asia. We proudly count with professors of all ranks, from recently graduated to renowned professors with a long academic career. Most of our publications are included in one of our about 30 collections with international editorial boards, and we have a good distribution network for printed and digital books. Another thing I'd like to mention is that we make a great effort to both physically and virtually attend conferences and book fairs of all sorts, always bringing along not only our own titles, but also those from our bookshop. We attend from really small single-day conferences in universities to bigger conferences like La Saili or AILA, just to give some examples. But the same goes to librarian conferences like ALA or Salam, or book fairs like Frankfurt, Guadalajara, or Liber Madrid. So we really believe in one-to-one contact with both authors and librarians, and traveling around the world carrying books is part of our work. So for all these reasons, we have been recognized as one of the most prestigious academic publishers specialized in Hispanic and Latin American studies by the SPI.
Oh, wow. So all of you have mentioned that book fairs matter. They allow you to, they serve as a mediator where a publisher can meet authors, you can meet other publishers, you can assess what kind of trends are there in the publishing fields in Latin America. And for me, the Phil Guadalajara and Liber have been most positive experience. Sometimes there is an urban myth. Estos bibliotecarios viajan para Phil para solamente pasear en Tianguis, en Tlaquepaque, pero no es la verdad. De verdad le digo, por mi ejemplo y de mis colegas, desde 8 de la mañana hasta 9 de la noche he visto colegas trabajando y como decir, no por ser grosero, como burros. No burros, burros en sentido de ser burros, pero para tener mejores publicaciones para nuestras bibliotecas universitarias, académicas. So I understand the importance of book fair. But with that same token, I wanted to ask Mr. Eduardo a question about, does he have any consejos for the editoriales, for the publishers as a librarian? For example, I remember a unique meeting with Maestra Micaela of Colegio de Mexico. When she saw me, she asked me about my predecessor, Carlos Delgado, for example. How is he doing? I was that human relation which I felt, during the book fair or during the visit to Ciudad de Mexico. ¿Qué tiene algunos consejos usted, señor Eduardo, para editoriales, para people who publish for us? Do you have any advice from your perspective as a librarian at Colegio de Mexico?
Bueno, esa es una pregunta muy complicada, pero sí hay algo que, bueno, yo mencionaba en la intervención previa, esta dificultad que tenemos yo creo que no solo en México, sino en América Latina, porque he platicado también con muchos colegas de América Latina en el tema de la distribución de los canales de comercialización de las publicaciones. Creo que se tiene que buscar también diversas alternativas, porque yo creo que esa es una de las principales dificultades que estamos enfrentando quienes nos dedicamos al trabajo con colecciones latinoamericanas, el tema del acceso. Sé que hay obviamente muchas editoriales que están publicando en formato electrónico, pero el formato electrónico no siempre es la solución para profesores y estudiantes en el área de humanidades. Si bien es cierto que, por ejemplo, en nuestro caso ahora con la pandemia, pues ha resuelto muchas emergencias, cursos que van a empezar, investigaciones que están en desarrollo, y, por ejemplo, hay proveedores que han detenido los envíos a México, y eso ha dificultado también que podamos tener libros publicados de manera reciente. Creo que se tienen que diversificar esos canales de comercialización. Sé que no es fácil porque, bueno, también para los editores implica un costo, pero creo que se tiene que hacer un esfuerzo desde ese punto de vista, diversificar esos canales de comercialización para que podamos tener acceso. Y hablo no solamente de las grandes editoriales o las editoriales comerciales, sino también me refiero a las propias universidades en América Latina, porque nos está costando mucho trabajo tener acceso a los fondos de determinadas universidades. Quizá una alternativa sería esta opción de la publicación bajo demanda, que ya están llevando a cabo muchas universidades que tienen los contactos dentro de los países, y que, bueno, es una manera de poder tener los libros por ejemplo, sin tener que pagar los gastos de envío, ¿no? Esa es una buena alternativa, y creo que se tiene que seguir trabajando en ese sentido. Lo reitero, los libros electrónicos son una muy buena solución, pero desafortunadamente no es la solución para todos los estudiantes y profesores que trabajan en las áreas de humanidades y ciencias sociales. Gracias.
Perfecto. Tenemos algunas preguntas para nuestros colegas de los editoriales. The question is as follows. When I started to work as a Latin American Studies assistant a while back ago, about, let me say, 2002, 2004, I came across all sorts of odd formats which Latin America produces. For example, there was a thing called Suelografía. So if anybody remembers Taller de Gráfica Popular in Ciudad de Mexico, and then these traditions were continued by, por ejemplo, Artemio Rodriguez. And I'm not trying to give names as if I'm putting the salsa on the tacos. That's not my intention. What I'm trying to say that we have a question similar to that. The question is from Señor Luis, and it says, ¿Tienen colecciones especiales de editoriales como cartoneras, right? Las cajas que cartonera. Everybody say, oh, Eloisa Cartonera, do you have that collection? ¿Qué opinan ustedes sobre este fenómeno editorial? The other question is from Taylor, our colleague, is similar questions as above. How do you all incorporate the notion of cultural production into your collections that does not go through the traditional publishing processes? And that question might be for us, Eduardo and myself, like cartoneras, zines, ephemera, and what are the ethical considerations around that type of cultural production or collection development? So these are very complicated questions, and we would need another webinar for it. But if you have any perspectives, our publishers, do you deal with any kind of odd formats at your publishing houses and at University of Texas Press? What do you think, Beatriz, Angelica? Take a stab at it, please.
Yeah, I actually really love these questions. And I think similar to what we were talking about, the book we published with Lila Spenson, our job is to document some of these special art forms. So we actually, well, we don't publish traditional cartoneras. We actually have two books that are documenting and looking at cartoneras, at traditional publishers that publish cartoneras. One of them is published. It's Public Pages by Marcy Schwartz. So she's kind of studying the literary and cultural significance around cartoneras. And so I think in terms of, I'm going to try to answer both of these questions. In terms of both of these, it's about another form of publishing, scenes and other ephemera. Our publishing program is taking a look at their significance and bringing those collections and putting them in one, taking a look at these different and synthesizing the importance of those types of publishing forms, and kind of looking at their significance, what brought them about, what is it, like addressing their importance in the cultural moment. So yes, tying it up, well, we don't publish those specifically. We have collections that are looking and studying those types of art forms.
Thank you so much. I don't mean to be like a pushy moderator here, but we are 5 minutes out and there are two questions to go through. So Beatriz, I think I'm going to send that question to you because it's directed towards you from Michael. Muy buena conversación. One subject that jumped out at me in a comment form from Beatriz was the different manifestations of public opinion in digital media. This was already an important focus in the, entre comillas, intelligence community, and I don't know what that means. But the subject is so much larger and in global spotlight, given many events over the past year, 2 or 3. But it's a more of a comment, but it was especially interesting to find it highlighted in the context of Latin American studies. Tantos temas interesantes, pero hay poco tiempo, right? As we used to say, joke when we were washing our dishes, oh, mucho trabajo, poco dinero. And here we have muchas preguntas, poco tiempo. So the last question, we are 3 minutes out, is to all of you, especially to librarians like Eduardo, Beatriz, and of course Angelica as publishing industries representatives, is as follows. So Professor Mariana Paz had mentioned that, asked the question from Dickinson College, where she says, what is your advice? Is it more important to publish in a compilation or an anthology of books, your own, let me say, investigative article or opinion piece or essay, or is it good to publish it separately in a peer-reviewed journal? Do you have any advice on that? Both Beatriz, Angelica, and Eduardo. You can chime in and then we can say bye to everybody.
I can start on this, if you don't mind. I guess it's less interesting sometimes for author to publish in an edited volume than in a relevant journal because of the evaluation points they receive for this publication form. But we receive many proposals from as a result of conferences on edited volumes, and as publishers, we still publish them, and but we take a particular focus on the coherence of the articles. And of course, the articles should complete each other. One difficulty that sometimes appears in edited volumes, especially if there are an output of a conference, is the differences in qualities. So, but we recently published some really interesting edited volumes. Like for one example, La Historia de la Ciencia Ficción en Latinoamericana, where we will just publish the second volume.
Thank you so much. Angelica, quickly.
I'll add that, and to say that yes, we publish them. I think they have their significance, and they definitely are important contributions. I think for us in our work pipeline, they can be a little bit more difficult in the review, trying to make sure that they all adhere to the same theme, making them have some coherence, and then not to mention all of the other technical things, permissions, and just trying to wrangle multiple contributors is a hard thing. But we do publish them. We have 2 that we're publishing in our current catalog. So.
Well, thank you so much. And I will quickly add that it depends on where you are also in your career. If you're up for the tenure, you have to check with your tenure requirements. Yep. And I cannot speak for the specifics of that. Having said that, we're almost 1 minute out. I wanted to thank Beatriz, Angelica, Eduardo for being such a gracious participants, to put up with my strong accent, to listen to my Spanglish. And I will hand over now to Alicia to end the concluding remarks quickly. Thank you, Alicia.
Gracias, Lila. De verdad el tiempo vuela con temas tan interesantes. Quiero agradecer a todos su participación, un excelente panel, una muy interesante plática. Muchísimas gracias a todos los que participaron. I want to thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. And I just remember that you will receive the recording via email, and thanks again for joining us. Muchísimas gracias a todos por participar. Recibirán la grabación vía correo. Muchísimas gracias. Un placer estar con ustedes.
Perfecto,
Gracias.
hasta luego.
Gracias a todos.
Gracias a ustedes.
Todos.
Que estén bien.